How do we go about atoning for our sins? Well, for normal people like me and you, it depends. Maybe your religion, your faith has a specific way that you're supposed to atone. By praying, by confessing. It's the normal way of atoning for normal people who commit normal sins. Petty crimes, lack of sympathy, gluttony, etc. Reasonable things that all humans may at some point falter to. And we can look at it and say, he can come back from that. But what if your sins are so unimaginable that a solution for atonement just doesn't seem possible? The slaughter of so many enemies that you've lost track, showing zero empathy doing it, only for your own ambitions. Finding a peaceful old lady who nurses you back to health just to return the favor by pillaging her village and her being killed in the process. To live your whole life pursuing vengeance, not worrying about the path of bodies it leaves behind. The story of Thorfinn is a powerful one that makes you think whether atonement exists for someone so mortifyingly brutal as him, after everything he's been through and seen. And most importantly, why didn't win a single award at the Crunchyroll Awards? I just binged the entire second season of Vinland Saga in 2 days. This might be the perfect season in all of anime. The contrast between this season and last are so stark, it's hard to see how they can be considered the same show. But I think it's this deep contrast and switch in tones that made the second season work so well. It sucks that Vinland Saga was up against such a stacked roster. And after actually watching the second season, there's no way it didn't win one award. Like, come on Crunchyroll, you could have just snuck in a Mickey category to just acknowledge how great of a season this was. But I'll digress, because Vinland Saga is a one-of-a-kind show that honestly doesn't need any awards to prove how great it is. So instead of asking about the awards Vinland Saga won, or I guess didn't win, allow me to ask a different question. How do we go about achieving world peace? Easy, by watching Vinland Saga. When I was told that the first season of Vinland Saga was only the prologue and that the actual story would begin in season 2, I found it very hard to believe. I mean, how could something that felt so complete only be the prologue? But they were correct. Except more specifically, it's the prologue to Thorfinn's story. Thorfinn spent his entire childhood searching for revenge, having no other meaning in his life except to kill Askeladd. And when he failed to get his revenge, he became lost, giving up his entire life, his entire family, his own personality, just to be left with nothing but anger and emptiness. So when we find Thorfinn, he's purposeless, mindlessly chopping down trees as a slave, and he probably would have stayed in that state if it wasn't for someone jolting him back to reality. Einar is one of many who had fallen victim to pillaging by the Danish. Not only once when he was a child, which is when his dad had been killed, but then a second time when he was much older after rebuilding the entire farming village by hand. The Danish attacked again, this time killing his mother and sister. Einar has probably suffered the most to the Danish raids out of anyone we've met in the story. He has a true reason for his hatred of them. They took his entire family, they took his entire life, and reduced him to solely being a slave. So the fact that he's the one who's able to build the closest bond with Thorfinn really says something about how much Thorfinn's able to change others. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. Einar meets Thorfinn as basically a slave partner, the both of them given a piece of land. After they finish clearing the forest of trees and build farmland on it, their owner, Kettle, will allow them to buy their freedom back and no longer be slaves. Probably the best reality a slave could come to, but at the end of the day, they're still slaves. I think if Einar had first learned that Thorfinn was a former warrior of the Danish and that all the unspeakable realities that he's gone through were done by the man who accompanies him every morning, then Einar would have killed him without question. But due to the fact that he's already seen Thorfinn have chances to lash out in anger and not react with violence, changed the way he thought about warriors. And not only warriors, but how he thought about change in humans. Seeing Thorfinn almost give his life for Einar for a stupid trial to become a man showed Einar that change is possible. After Thorfinn revealed who he was in the past, there was a part of Einar that really and truly wanted to kill Thorfinn, to somehow attribute and maybe dull down the pain of what he's been through. But as he sat there, choking him out, he realized that the man that he was choking out had no residuals of the boy he once was. He was an entirely different person, allowing Einar to believe that major change within a person is possible. But this is on such a small scale. How could Einar, and more importantly Thorfinn, build a resolve that's able to change the world? Thorfinn has been plagued with nightmares. Every night, he yells in his sleep and is looking for something to grab onto. Anything. And then after a long struggle, he wakes up in a cold sweat with zero recollection of what he just dreamed of. Eventually, Einar and Thorfinn get into a fight with some of the retainers after they trash their farm, and Thorfinn gets knocked out, finally allowing us to see what he's been dreaming about all this time. His dream starts in a flowery field where there's nothing but peace. peace. His father then shows up and asks him who he killed with that knife. The knife being the one that Thors gave to Thorfinn to protect himself. We're given a very eerie picture of Thorfinn with a knife stabbed into the neck of Einar as a child. Hands then come out of the ground, and at this point, we switch scenes into a barren wasteland. And Thor says that there's no one who it's okay to hurt, kind of reflecting on his own past. Sad that he wasn't able to teach Thorfinn everything that he had learned and regretted in life, due to the fact that Thorfinn was so young when his father died. The zombie-like figures begin to pull Thorfinn through the ground, but Thor's is still standing. They then drag him down to what essentially is hell. Finding Askeladd sitting on a pillar, he learns that this place is actually worse than hell. It's the warrior's purgatory, a place of death and misery that few can escape, being that the only way you're able to escape is to bring the death that you've caused along with you. Askeladd calls this being a true warrior, one who doesn't forget about the pain they've caused, but instead carries it on their shoulders, hoping to bring a new light to their own world, seeking eternal atonement from those he's killed as he walks the path of a true warrior. I could spend hours trying to decipher the true meaning of what the dream meant, but there are a few key points that are really worth understanding. Thorfinn went from a peaceful field to a barren wasteland at the beginning of the dream, which essentially represented the world he was currently living in against the world that he's been trying to hide. Being a true warrior and bringing all your suffering along will never bring you to that luscious green field. And in Thorfinn's case, Vinland will never become a paradise for him to forget about everything that he's done. It will always be that barren wasteland due to what he's done as a warrior, and that's something that he must carry in order to atone for his past sins. The second is that Thorfinn mistakes the warrior's hell for Valhalla. Thorfinn understands that being a warrior is impossible to stop, since that's what the fighting culture has been built around. People won't stop fighting just because you tell them. To them, fighting is their way of making it to heaven, even if this is what their heaven looks like. So in order to change the world, he must first change the culture. Last is that Thorfinn isn't the only one whose sins are constantly trying to drag him down. The same thing is happening to Thor's, and yet he's still standing while Thorfinn is being dragged to the ground. I think this is the best writing in the entire show because it basically depicts the first season in perfection. Thor's isn't being dragged down because he already knows the path of what a true warrior is. He understands what type of pain and sorrow comes with being a warrior and what fighting for Valhalla comes with. It's the sole reason that he turned his back from the war and fled. Violence brings nothing in the world, and he was ready to adhere by that value. But just like a clock, the cycle of war gave way to violence and took Thorfinn down the same path of Thor's. And we come entirely full circle when we see Thorfinn walking down the same path that Thor's is after the dream is finished. Thorfinn realizes that this is what Thor's was fighting for Thorfinn to understand that they have no enemies. Thorfinn's resolve to stop wars and slaves is now stronger than ever. He makes an oath to renounce all violence, and more specifically to never hurt anyone ever again. That doesn't mean he'll never fight again, it just won't be out of a place of violence, and instead it's only to help others. This shows with how he protected Gardar. Fast forward a little, and Thorfinn has an opportunity to speak with King Canute after taking 100 punches from this big brawlic nigga.
あんた方は俺の敵じゃない。俺に敵なんかいない。
Earning the respect of everyone around him, Thorfinn is allowed to see the king. Standing by his oath, his conversation with the king brings him closer to the path that he must travel. Their conversation brings them to an inevitable crossroads, being that both Thorfinn and Canute have seen both the necessary evils of the world as well as the pacifistic ideologies. I mean, before Canute became what he was in season 2, he couldn't hurt a fly, and well, we all know what Thorfinn was like before season 2. The crossroads is the decision between choosing the necessary evils over a pacifistic approach. So, standing by his oath, there's only one solution that Thorfinn could think of, and that's to run. Run as far as possible, along the way filling the gaps that Canute is unable to do. What's the point of fighting if it's just going to repeat the cycle that he and many others have already experienced? If he can save just one person from that fate, then that's more than enough for Thorfinn. Canute is amazed at the idea that Thorfinn will just run, and I think that Canute decides to side with Thorfinn for the same reason that Einar was able to. Canute sees the change of ideals that Thorfinn's gone through and is truly able to place his trust in him because of the extremes that he's been through. The path of atonement for Thorfinn is long and clouded, but he's dedicated to make it to the end as a way to reach true atonement. But deep down in my heart, I know that the path that Thorfinn is following just gets harder and harder down the road. Wow, I never thought a farming simulator could be this fucking good. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I could have made this into a much longer yap fest, but I decided to cut it short. So let me know if you want me to make a part 2. Honestly, genuinely enjoyed the second season and can't wait for the third one. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. We're closing in on 500 subscribers. Leave a comment on how you felt about Vinland Saga Season 2. And with that, peace, y'all.